But Thatcherism was still reeking as it had reeked for the previous decade, the most heinous social, economic and...
In 2013, 2 days after Margaret Thatcher died, Glenda Jackson stood up in Parliament and delivered an attack so brutal that MPs shouted for her to sit down. She didn't stop. For 8 minutes, she tore apart the Iron Lady while the entire room erupted in chaos. But this wasn't her first explosive moment. Throughout her career, she had walked off sets, fought with directors, and turned down millions rather than compromise. From nude scenes that got her death threats to political speeches that went viral, Jackson never backed down. The pattern started decades earlier, and the real reason might surprise you. Glenda Jackson was born on May 9, 1936, at 151 Market Street in Birkenhead, Cheshire. Her name came from Glenda Farrell, a fast-talking Hollywood actress who played streetwise women. That name choice said everything about her mother Joan, who dreamed of something bigger even while pulling pints, scrubbing floors, and working shop counters just to keep the family afloat. After moving to 21 Lake Place, they lived in a tiny 2-up, 2-down house with an outside toilet. Her father, Harry, was a bricklayer who joined the Navy and worked on a minesweeper during the war. Jackson was the eldest of 4 girls in a home where work meant survival. She later said, "If you didn't work, you didn't eat," and that hard truth shaped her for life. She left school after failing her certificate at age 16, not 15 as many believed. Without qualifications, she had no way to go to university. From 1952 to 1954, she worked long hours for very little money at Boots the Chemist. She hated it, calling it that bloody chemist's shop. She served customers, filled prescriptions, and stocked shelves while watching wealthier classmates move on to better futures. Her break came when she joined a friend at an amateur theater group at the Hoylake YMCA. They performed J.B. Priestley's Mystery of Green Fingers, and after one show, someone told her, "You should do this professionally." That moment planted the idea that changed everything. Her earliest education didn't come from books, but from cinema. During and after the war, she sat in dark picture houses in Birkenhead and Hoylake, watching films for just sixpence. Hollywood gave her dreams while rationing took everything else. Her mother's choice of name suddenly made sense. She'd named her daughter after a woman who played bold, working-class heroines, as if predicting Glenda's future. Watching Gone with the Wind and gangster flicks gave her an escape. It also lit a fire inside her that her real life couldn't put out. In 1955, she applied to RADA, the only drama school she had ever heard of. At first, they told her they had no money for a scholarship. But then, something unexpected happened. The manager at Boots wrote to the Cheshire County Council and helped her get a grant. She arrived at RADA at 18, joining a class that included Albert Finney, Sian Phillips, and Richard Bryars. Unlike many of her classmates who came from privilege, Jackson came with experience. She'd already worked and lived through poverty. She said she wasn't there to play at being bohemian. She was there to work. At RADA, she faced pressure to lose her northern accent. Everyone was expected to speak in posh, polished tones. Jackson refused. She held onto her voice as a symbol of who she was. This wasn't just about speech. It was about class. She stood her ground while others conformed. When John Fernald took over as principal that same year, he began shifting the school away from its upper-class roots. Jackson, along with Finney, became part of the new wave that brought real voices and real stories to the stage. She wasn't interested in being a perfect imitation. She was there to be truthful. Her first real acting job came in 1957 at the Crew Repertory Theater. She earned just $3 a week. That didn't even cover proper food. She stayed in damp, cockroach-ridden digs with no heat and shared bathrooms. Some nights, actors slept on the floor, sharing one mattress. She lost weight. She had one real meal a day. When she got sick with the flu, she couldn't afford to miss a show. She performed with a fever. Actors weren't just acting. They were sweeping floors, selling tickets, and moving scenery. It was brutal. But Jackson kept going. In 1964, she joined the Royal Shakespeare Company. But instead of recognition, she was hit with a different kind of judgment. Directors called her interesting but not beautiful. She was given roles as maids or side characters because of her sharp features and voice. Her Ophelia was described as too harsh. Critics dismissed her for not fitting their idea of femininity. She nearly quit in 1963, but Peter Brook saw something different in her. He realized her strength and intelligence could change the way women were seen on stage. The label "ugly duckling" soon became meaningless, as she began drawing crowds with her raw, magnetic performances. In 1965, she shook the theater world when she performed nude in Margaret Thatcher. As Charlotte Corday, she appeared bloodied and topless while stabbing Marat. Audiences watched in shock as she was assaulted and whipped on stage. It wasn't about shock for shock's sake. It was about showing the brutality of revolution. She got death threats. Theaters refused to show the play. But she didn't back down. When the film version came out in 1966, things got worse. Her nude scene was cut in Britain, but shown for nearly 3 minutes in Europe. Politicians called it communist propaganda. Churches protested. But despite being blacklisted by family-friendly studios, the scandal made her an international name. In 1971, she went on The Morecambe and Wise Show as Cleopatra. Nobody expected her to be funny. But when she said, "All men are fools, and what makes them so is having beauty like what I have got," people were stunned. Her timing was perfect. Even Eric Morecambe, who had doubted her, was blown away. That sketch led to A Touch of Class, which won her the Oscar. She had gone from radical theater to romantic comedy almost overnight. In 1969's Women in Love, she played artist Gudrun Brangwyn and delivered one of cinema's most notorious lines. "How are your thighs? Are they strong? Because I want to drown in flesh." Hot, physical, naked, flesh. The film had full frontal male nudity and got an X rating. Jackson's intensity never wavered. The fireplace wrestling scene between Oliver Reed and Alan Bates was shot over and over again in a cold Victorian mansion. Jackson didn't flinch. At 33, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, the first British woman to do so for an X-rated film. Then came The Music Lovers in 1971. She played Tchaikovsky's wife, a woman desperate for love and overwhelmed by sexual obsession. There were masturbation scenes and graphic nudity. British censors made 18 cuts. American distributors cut 3 more. Protesters lined up outside cinemas. Some called her morally corrupt. But Jackson saw it differently. She was exploring a mind unraveling under the weight of loneliness. In 1975, she played Solange in The Maids. To prepare, she vanished for 3 weeks, cutting contact with everyone. She studied real murder cases involving maids. During rehearsals, she never broke character. People on set said she frightened them. Her co-star, Susanna York, saw the transformation happen in front of her eyes. When the audience watched Jackson perform the final murder scene, some fainted. That same year, she starred in Hedda Gabler with the Royal Shakespeare Company. Director Trevor Nunn had a different vision, and Jackson didn't agree. At 39, some said she was too old for the role. Rehearsals turned into battles. She threw her script in frustration. She argued over Hedda's motivations. Timothy West, her co-star, later said her stage presence was terrifying. but no one could deny the force of her performance. In 1978, she played poet Stevie Smith. The script was written, but Jackson didn't stick to it. She read hundreds of Smith's poems and started improvising. She added eerie monologues and disturbing verses about suicide that weren't in the original screenplay. Her co-stars struggled to keep up. Trevor Howard said some scenes were incomprehensible because of her sudden changes, but her performance was unforgettable. Her reading of Not Waving But Drowning chilled the audience to the bone. Glenda Jackson had just started filming Women in Love in 1969 when she found out she was pregnant. She didn't tell the director, Ken Russell, right away. When he finally learned the truth, he was shocked at first, but then he smiled and said her body looked even better on camera now, and he made the bold decision to redo all her nude scenes just to highlight her pregnancy curves. She later joked that she had never looked so good naked, but behind the camera, things weren't calm. The tabloids were going wild with stories of an affair between Glenda and Oliver Reed. They both denied it, but the rumors wouldn't stop. On top of that, there was the now famous nude wrestling scene between Reed and Alan Bates. The two actors were so uncomfortable with the idea of comparing their bodies on camera that each drank an entire bottle of vodka before shooting it. Just 1 year later, in 1971, Glenda starred in Sunday Bloody Sunday. This time she played a bisexual woman caught in a three-way love story. It made headlines because the film showed two men kissing on screen, something no big film had ever done before. Some people in theaters gasped and made loud remarks. Some even walked out saying it made them sick. A few cinemas refused to show the film altogether. But Glenda didn't care. She stood by it. She was proud of playing a woman who didn't fit into society's neat boxes. The performance earned her another Oscar nomination. In 1973, she won her second Oscar for A Touch of Class. It looked like a sweet romantic comedy, but behind the scenes, it was anything but. Her co-star George Segal kept changing the script, which drove Glenda mad. She liked things planned and prepared. He liked to wing it. They argued so often that the director had to keep stepping in just to calm them down. She even threatened to quit several times. But when the film came out, it made $16.8 million and proved that Glenda could lead a hit comedy and still be taken seriously. She had become one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, making $500,000 per movie. In 1975, she worked on The Romantic Englishwoman and clashed badly with the director Joseph Losey. She added nude scenes that weren't in the script, and he was furious. He said she was impossible to control, but she refused to back down. She believed the extra scenes helped show her character's emotions. The arguments got so bad that the $2 million budget went over due to constant reshoots. Still, her raw performance was praised as one of her boldest. 3 years later, in 1978, she starred in House Calls with Walter Matthau. Once again, there was tension. She kept rewriting her lines and refused to say anything she thought was weak or disrespectful to women. She'd walk onto set with handwritten notes and demand changes on the spot. Matthau didn't like that. He was relaxed. She was intense, and they clashed nearly every day. The film cost $8 million, but her scenes took extra time because of all the changes. In the end, their on-screen chemistry worked, and the film made over $25 million. In real life, Glenda was going through pain. In 1974, she won her second Oscar, but her marriage was falling apart. She had been with Roy Hodges for 16 years, and they had a 5-year-old son named Dan. But the marriage couldn't survive her busy career. She later said, "Watching the Oscars felt like watching a public hanging." The next year, She started an affair with a lighting director named Andy Phillips. Roy found out and filed for divorce in November 1975. Glenda had won for playing a free, independent woman. Now, her real life was starting to match. That same year, she took on the role of Hedda Gabler. The film included a very intense suicide scene that looked shockingly real. What the audience didn't know was that Glenda had sunk so deeply into the character that she started having her own breakdown. Playing Hedda made her feel numb and hollow inside. Her affair and her work began to mix together, and she later admitted that Hedda's pain started to feel like her own. In 1973, she had the chance to star in The Exorcist, a film that went on to make $441 million. She said no. She called the script disgusting and didn't want to be part of it. That decision likely cost her $2 to $3 million in earnings and maybe even another Oscar nomination. The studio had wanted her for her intensity and talent, but Glenda didn't care. She believed in meaningful roles, not sensational ones. In 1979, while filming Lost and Found with Art Garfunkel, things got so bad that Glenda walked off set for 3 days. Garfunkel kept trying to change lines and direct scenes himself. Glenda thought he was unprofessional. That short walkout ended up costing the production $150,000. When she came back, she had full control over their scenes. But when the movie came out, it flopped. She had been right again. In 1980, on the set of Hopscotch, she and Walter Matthau exploded into another shouting match. She corrected one of his lines and called him lazy. He said she was pretentious. The fight was so bad, the director shut down filming for a whole day, costing $50,000. Glenda refused to come out of her trailer, and Matthau threatened to leave the film entirely. The story spread across Hollywood, and her reputation as difficult grew even more. Then, in 1982, she played stroke survivor Patricia Neal in a TV movie. To make the performance real, Glenda spent time with actual stroke patients, but she took things to an extreme. During one scene, she refused painkillers and kept acting through real pain for 4 hours. The crew was horrified. The nurse on set filed a report, but Glenda wouldn't stop until the scene felt honest. She earned a BAFTA nomination, but people wondered if it was worth what she put herself through. In 1985, she starred with Ben Kingsley in Turtle Diary. The movie was quiet and emotional, but behind the scenes, the gossip was loud. People claimed the two actors were having an affair. Someone said they saw them in her trailer. Ben's wife showed up on set near the end of filming. Paparazzi caught her arguing with Glenda. When reporters asked, Glenda didn't deny or confirm anything. She just said she didn't answer to gossip. In 1989, at age 53, she took off her clothes for the rainbow and shocked everyone. She did a full frontal nude scene that lasted over 3 minutes. Some people called it brave. Others called it too much. The studio wanted her to use a body double. She refused. She said women don't become invisible after menopause. The film got an 18 rating in the UK, mostly because of her scene. But she didn't care. She believed in honesty and power, no matter her age. In the 1980s, her interviews became almost as famous as her roles. She hated shallow questions and often turned interviews into lectures. One time, in 1987, a reporter asked about her beauty routine. She slammed the table and called him sexist. The clip was never aired, but word spread. Some media outlets started avoiding her. Her publicist said it was like career suicide. But Glenda didn't care. She refused to play along. Then, in 1992, she shocked everyone again. She was 56 and at the top of her career. But she quit acting and ran for Parliament. She had never even been to a local Labour meeting before. But she was furious with Margaret Thatcher. She once walked into a glass door out of anger after hearing Thatcher's words on TV. Glenda gave up millions in acting money for a $30,000 salary as an MP. She wasn't just pretending to be bold in films. She was bold in real life. That same year, she ran against Oliver Letwin, a former advisor to Thatcher. He was 36 and well-connected. She had no experience, but she had fire. She walked in the rain, knocked on doors, and faced hecklers calling her a joke. But she didn't back down. On May 9, 1992, she beat Letwin by just 1,240 votes. Her win shocked everyone and got her a front bench position just 4 years later. But even as a politician, she didn't follow the rules. She often voted against her own party. In 1999, she quit her government job just to run for London mayor. She lost badly, getting only 4.4% of the vote. People called it political suicide. But Glenda didn't care about popularity. In 2005, she even threatened to challenge Tony Blair unless he stepped down. Her biggest moment came in 2003 during the Iraq War debates. She stood up in Parliament and interrupted Blair's speech to call the war illegal. Blair ignored her completely, which only made her criticism louder. After the war and the death of weapons expert Dr. David Kelly, Glenda demanded Blair resign. She didn't care if her own party turned on her. She believed in doing what was right. Her final explosion came in 2013, just 2 days after Margaret Thatcher died. Parliament gathered to pay respects. Glenda stood up and delivered an 8-minute attack that stunned everyone. She said Thatcher had hurt the country and that she didn't consider her a real woman. MPs shouted for her to sit down, but she kept going. Her office received 900 emails the next day. Most were messages of support. The clip went viral. She had once again said what others were too afraid to say. When Glenda Jackson was appointed Transport Minister in May 1997, she immediately started pushing a $26 billion plan to improve public transport, especially rail. She said cars were part of the problem, and even claimed that drivers should be stuck in traffic just to see clean buses pass them by. Her goal was to make people abandon cars altogether. But her message hit a wall when she was caught using her own car to show up at transport events. Photos of her getting out of her vehicle instead of using the very buses she praised spread fast. People began calling her a hypocrite. Her defense was that not everyone lived in a city, and some places genuinely needed cars. But that only made the contradiction worse. In Parliament, she was grilled by Conservative MPs, who said her actions didn't match her words. She called it petty politics. But her credibility took a hit she never fully recovered from. 3 years later, in 2000, she shocked everyone again by sleeping on the streets of Westminster to draw attention to homelessness. Jackson said her childhood in Birkenhead taught her how real that fear could be. She used cardboard for bedding and chose a doorway near Parliament to spend the night. It was freezing. She said it made her feel scared, cold, and deeply vulnerable. Some praised her commitment, but others slammed the act as a publicity stunt. The stunt happened just as Parliament debated the $198 million rough sleepers budget. At that time, about 700 people were sleeping rough in England, down from 1,850 in 1998. But the press had a field day, and MPs were divided on whether this was empathy or theater. Then came 2005. Jackson was barely re-elected with just 451 votes in Hampstead and Highgate. And that victory came with another firestorm. Critics claimed she was acting in debates instead of truly speaking from the heart. Because of her Oscar-winning background, opponents said she used dramatic pauses and gestures to manipulate audiences. There was even video analysis claiming she moved like she was on stage, not in Parliament. On top of that, her office was under scrutiny for $14,000 in renovation expenses. One rival said she had turned politics into a performance. Jackson pushed back hard, saying Parliament was for serious-minded people, not performers. But the shadow of her acting past kept following her for the rest of her political career. Her final major moment in politics came in March 2015. In one of her last speeches before retiring, Jackson stood up in Parliament and delivered a furious 12-minute attack on conservative austerity measures. She said the cuts were taking public spending back to the 1930s. She pointed out the $3 billion in tax cuts for the wealthy, while social services were being gutted. She said George Osborne's plans would force the UK to rethink the very role of government. She was 79 then, and her speech got a standing ovation from Labour MPs. But on the other side, Conservatives jeered when she compared current Britain to pre-NHS times. Despite Tony Blair reportedly trying to convince her to stay, Jackson stepped away after 23 years in Parliament. Her retirement didn't stop the controversies. During a 2019 interview while playing King Lear in New York, she said the 17.4 million people who voted Leave in the Brexit referendum had been misled. She claimed they didn't have enough information to make that decision. The backlash online was fierce. Leave supporters started campaigns telling her to stay in America. She said Parliament had lost its reason and that she couldn't believe what she was seeing from her old colleagues. Theresa May's Brexit negotiations, she said, made no sense to her at all. Her critics called it elite snobbery, but Jackson didn't take anything back. She said crashing out of the EU with no deal would be a disaster and refused to sugarcoat it. That same year, at 82, she returned to Broadway to play King Lear. It was a nearly 4-hour show, performed 8 times a week. She was small in size, but completely commanded the stage. Critics said her age and fragility made her version of Lear even more powerful. Some reviews weren't kind to the rest of the cast, but almost all agreed Jackson herself was a force. One critic called her performance a coiled tempest. She pushed through every line, even as the production's long run pushed everyone to their limits. Her stamina amazed audiences. At 83, she was still outpacing actors half her age. The year before that, she had starred in 3 Tall Women, and a strange interview followed. A Los Angeles Times reporter went to talk to her over tea. But Jackson's intensity overwhelmed the whole meeting. She banged the table. Her answers were clipped. The reporter said he left wiped out. Jackson later admitted she knew she came off too strong, saying that what worked on stage didn't work at a tea table. But that moment added to her reputation as someone who didn't soften her edges, not even for press. In 2020, she played a woman with dementia in Elizabeth is Missing, and this time her performance came from a very personal place. Her own mother had suffered from Alzheimer's. Jackson met with doctors and spent time learning what patients go through. She said their anger was really just frustration. The 87-minute film showed her character slipping in and out of reality, determined to solve a mystery even as her memory collapsed. Critics praised her for allowing cameras to capture every wrinkle, every sign of age. She didn't hold back. She won a BAFTA for it. In 2022, Jackson filmed what would be her final role in The Great Escaper, acting alongside Michael Caine. The film was based on a real story about an 89-year-old war veteran who escaped his care home to attend a D-Day anniversary. Jackson played his wife. Her health was clearly failing. She looked frail, with every line and shadow on her face visible in high definition. But the performance was still full of charm and grit. Sadly, she died just before the film came out. She was 87. Her death was described as peaceful, surrounded by family, after a short illness. Tributes came from across the political spectrum. Even Michael Caine said she was one of the greats. What made her later years even more fascinating was her living arrangement. She shared a home in Blackheath with her son Dan Hodges, a conservative political columnist. She had spent decades as a Labour MP, while her son wrote for the Mail on Sunday. She once joked that she must have done something right as a parent if her son turned out to believe the opposite of everything she stood for. Conservative MPs even told her they loved reading Dan's columns. She said she never argued with him about politics. "He's a grown-up, and I'm a grown-up," she explained. "You just have to live with your differences." After her death, questions began to rise about unpublished memoirs she might have left behind. She had always been private, rarely doing celebrity interviews. But people close to her hinted there might be personal writings that offered more about her life, especially her early relationships. Her 1976 divorce had already drawn attention. Her husband filed because of adultery, which she didn't deny. Jackson later said, "I've never been in a nonviolent relationship." She often joked about her heartbreaks. "When I have to cry, I think about my love life. And when I have to laugh, I think about my love life." If the writings are ever published, they'll likely focus more on her work than gossip. But even without them, her story already reads like a blueprint for how to live fiercely and on your own terms.